Amish beekeepers across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana run hives through brutal winters with survival rates that put commercial operations to shame. And they do it with a method that has never been written down, never been sold, and never appeared in a single beekeeping course. So what do they know that the supply catalog has spent decades making sure you never learn? Here's the full story. Here is a number that should bother every beekeeper in a cold climate. The national average winter loss rate in the United States runs between 30 and 50% every single year. Half the colonies gone by spring in the worst years. And the response from the industry is always the same. Buy replacement packages, buy better wraps, buy heated equipment, buy treatments, and try again next year. Now here is a number you will not find in any commercial beekeeping report. In Amish communities where beekeeping has been passed down for generations without interruption, winter survival is treated not as a hopeful outcome, but as the expected baseline. Losing a hive over winter is considered a failure of method, not bad luck. And the method they use to achieve that is not written in any book, not sold in any catalog, and not taught in any course, because it was passed from father to son verbally, demonstrated by hand, and never commercialized. The reason it works is that the Amish never adopted the assumptions the modern beekeeping industry is built on. They never accepted that bees need to be fed sugar, wrapped in foam, treated with chemicals, and replaced annually. They kept bees the way bees were kept before there was an industry selling solutions to problems the industry itself created. The core of the method comes down to one principle that costs almost nothing to apply. A bee colony that goes into winter dry, well-provisioned with its own honey, and clustered in the right cavity size, does not die. Everything the Amish do for winter preparation serves those three conditions: dry, honey-fed, right-sized. And the single most important and least understood of these is the first one. Bees do not freeze to death in winter. A healthy cluster generates more than enough heat to survive temperatures far below zero. What kills them is moisture. When a cluster breathes through a sealed hive all winter, it produces water vapor. That vapor rises, hits the cold inner cover, condenses into droplets, and rains back down onto the cluster as cold water. A wet cluster chills and dies. The Amish solved this generations before anyone wrote a paper about hive condensation. Their solution is the $1 method that has never been written down. They place a simple absorbent material directly above the cluster, under the outer cover that catches the rising moisture before it can condense and drip. In the old Pennsylvania Dutch tradition, this was a folded burlap feed sack, sometimes layered with dry straw or wood shavings packed loosely above it. The burlap absorbs the vapor. The straw above it holds and slowly releases the moisture out through the small gap under the telescoping cover. The cluster stays dry all winter. The total cost of this is whatever a feed sack and a handful of straw is worth. Effectively, $1. Effectively free. And it is the single most important winter intervention there is, because it eliminates the actual mechanism that kills overwintering colonies. Quick word before I go on. I've spent years pulling these old methods together. The winter wraps, the cures, the forage tricks the catalogs left out, and I wrote the whole collection down plain in the Hive Vault over at daleshive.com. This winter method, and a lot more like it, are in Volume 1. The video's free and always will be. The Vault's just the long version for folks who want it all in one place. I won't mention it again. The second pillar of the Amish winter method is provisioning the colony with its own honey rather than sugar syrup, and this is where the industry's incentives diverge most sharply from what actually works. Commercial beekeeping pulls maximum honey in late summer and replaces the colony's winter stores with sugar syrup, which is cheaper than the honey it replaces. The Amish do the opposite. They leave the colony enough of its own honey to overwinter on. A colony wintering on honey rather than sugar enters spring stronger, healthier, and with a more robust immune response because honey contains the trace nutrients, enzymes, and compounds that sugar water does not. This is not sentimentality, it is provisioning logic. A colony fed its own honey does not need supplemental feeding through winter, does not get disturbed by midwinter feeding interventions, and does not enter spring nutritionally depleted. The Amish beekeeper takes the surplus and leaves the colony its survival stores. The commercial beekeeper takes everything and sells the colony sugar in return. One method produces colonies that survive winter reliably. The other produces a recurring sugar purchase and a recurring spring replacement order. The third pillar is cavity size, and this is the one almost nobody outside the tradition understands. A bee colony clusters in winter to conserve heat. The size of the space it has to heat directly affects how much energy it burns and how vulnerable it is to chilling. The modern Langstroth configuration often leaves a colony in too much empty vertical space going into winter. Extra supers, partially filled boxes, excess room the cluster must work to keep from becoming a cold sink. The Amish reduce the colony's winter cavity to match its actual size. They remove excess boxes, consolidate the colony into the space it can comfortably heat, and let the cluster occupy a snug, appropriately sized cavity. A correctly sized cavity means the cluster spends less energy heating dead air, consumes its honey stores more slowly, and maintains a more stable core temperature through cold snaps. This single adjustment, combined with the moisture management and the honey provisioning, is the entire system: dry, honey-fed, right-sized, 3 conditions costing almost nothing, producing the winter survival rates that make Amish apiaries quietly outperform operations spending hundreds of dollars per hive on commercial winter products. Let me tell you what this did at my own apiary. My third winter, I lost 2 of 4 hives. I had done everything the catalog told me. Insulated wraps, entrance reducers, midwinter sugar feeding, the works. Both dead colonies were soaked in mold when I opened them in February. The bees had not starved, and they had not frozen. They had drowned in their own condensation inside the expensive wraps I had bought to protect them. A neighbor whose family had kept bees for 3 generations looked at my setup and shook his head. He told me the wraps were trapping the moisture in. He showed me what his family did: a folded burlap sack and a few inches of dry wood shavings above the cluster. An upper entrance left open a crack. The colony consolidated down to the boxes it actually filled, and enough of its own honey left on to winter through without feeding. Cost me almost nothing. A feed sack I already had, and a bag of shavings from the pet store. The next winter, 4 for 4. Every colony came through dry, strong, and building before the first spring flow. I have not wrapped a hive in foam since. I have not done a midwinter feeding since. And I have not lost a colony to winter since. The method was never complicated. It was just never written down because the people who knew it had no reason to sell it. Here are the mistakes that cause winter losses even when people try this. Mistake 1. Using a sealed inner cover with no moisture pathway. The absorbent material only works if the moisture it captures has somewhere to go. An upper entrance or a small gap under the outer cover is essential. Seal it completely and the absorbent material saturates and fails. Mistake 2. Leaving wet absorbent material in place all winter. Check it once in deep winter. If the burlap or shavings are saturated, swap them for dry material. In most climates, one swap is enough for the whole season, but a saturated quilt that is never checked stops working. Mistake 3. Stealing too much honey in late summer. A colony wintered on inadequate stores will starve regardless of how dry and well-sized it is. Leave enough. In most northern climates, that means 60 to 90 pounds of honey going into winter. Greed in August is the most common cause of death in February. Mistake 4. Leaving the colony in too much space. A small colony rattling around in 3 boxes of mostly empty comb cannot keep itself warm. Consolidate. Match the cavity to the cluster. The colony will tell you how much space it actually fills if you look. Picture your apiary next winter on the Amish system, a folded sack and a few inches of shavings above each cluster, catching every bit of rising moisture. An upper entrance cracked open to let the vapor escape. Each colony consolidated into the space it actually fills, snug and efficient. Each one wintering on its own honey rather than sugar water, entering the cold strong and well-nourished. No foam wraps, no heated bases, no midwinter sugar feeding, no spring replacement order. Just 3 conditions: dry, honey-fed, right-sized, applied for the cost of a feed sack and a bag of shavings. Drop a comment and tell me what your winter losses have looked like and what you have been spending to prevent them. I read every single one at Dale's Hive. And if this kept even one hive alive for you this winter, the full collection of these methods is waiting in the vault at daleshive.com. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week we are covering the full fall preparation checklist, week by week, so your colonies go into winter setup exactly the way the Amish have done it for 200 years. The method was never written down because it was never for sale. Now you have it.